America bans TikTok. How do you deal with hate comments? And I reveal the single tip that I heard that finally got me over the line to starting my channel, which was also my secret ingredient to actually growing my channel so fast. I'm Ryan Bolt, and you're listening to Clickworthy. I'm also covering a few other things about my channel in this, but welcome to the channel. Well, welcome to the show. Are you someone who you're thinking about starting to try and make some content either for any platform, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and maybe you are struggling to actually hit that record button or actually hit upload on a video that you might have tried to make? Or are you someone who you've made a couple of initial pieces of content and they just haven't done well and you're looking for some tips? Well, this is the podcast for you because I, unlike most of the, in quotation marks, gurus on how to grow social media and stuff, I'm not just trying to sell you some course on how to grow on those channels. I am just a full-time content creator myself, the YouTuber probably better known as Culinary Garden, and I just really like talking about being a content creator, and also I think I would describe how you grow a lot better in just a completely different way to what most of those content creator advice channels try to describe. And a lot of the stuff that those guys give are just such an echo chamber of tips that people will click on but aren't necessarily as handy to help you grow compared to some of the stuff that we will eventually get to in this podcast, because I can only cover so much in every episode. Speaking of which, I think it's really important for me to say thank you for listening, because this is only the second episode. The first one had about 175 downloads in the first 4 or 5 days is when this is getting recorded, this has been a complete soft launch of the podcast. I haven't told anyone from my main audience yet that I'm launching this, and all of those downloads are from either organic people or people who follow some of the secondary accounts, kind of finding the clips on TikTok or something like that, and then going and listening to the show. So thank you very much. That response is much more than I was hoping for. I was expecting to see maybe 5 downloads or something on the first show. So that, yeah, in what I was originally planning on doing, well, what I am planning on doing is I want to get about 3 episodes out there that are covering different topics so that then I can kind of do a bit more of a hard launch of the podcast. And then there's a little bit of a back library of content that anyone who wants to listen to it can just sort of pick their favorite topic and take it on from there. Which, if this is by any chance your first episode, you can start from anywhere. I do cover some news stories, but it's completely fine to start from wherever, because about 65% of the content in any podcast of any of these episodes is going to be completely evergreen content. Now, to talk about myself for a second, if you'll indulge me, I, for the first time in a while, have a 1 out of 10 video, which, if you have no idea what that means, on YouTube, when you see a video, even though when you are watching someone else's video, it has however many views it has, one of the original misconceptions that I have realized from someone who watched a lot of YouTube to now being a YouTuber is I thought videos got most of their views very quickly in the first day or couple days and then just kind of flatlined. But what actually happens is you get about 50% of your views over the course of the first 30 days, and then your views on that video will probably double again over the next 1 to 2 years, unless something strange in the world happens. So what YouTube does is it gives you this tool that you can see on your dashboard it's just called the out of 10 ranking, where you can see how your video compares to your last 10 videos at that same point in time. Say, right now, my second last video that came out was me reviewing a whole bunch of Garden Tammy products. And that is the one that is the 1 out of 10, which is actually a really good thing, where it's been out for, I think, 4 or 5 days as of recording, and it's rounding out about 40,000 views. And compared to my last 10 videos that have been out for that same amount of, say, 4 days, then it is ranking significantly better, was ranking the top out of all of those videos. Even though, say, the second video on that list, which is where I was busting some garden myths, that video is sitting on about 120, 130,000 views, but that one's been out for 5 or so weeks. So even though the Temu video has only about 40,000 views, and then the myth busting video has literally 3 times that, because of what YouTube's able to show you with how those views accumulate over time, it looks like the Temu video is more well performing, which is something that I am super stoked about because I haven't had a 1 in 10 video in a fair while since sort of taking the channel full time and just putting out more content. I have, just not had one that's been that absolute 1 out of 10, usually because I, just before going full time, I had a couple of videos do really well. So it took a while to get out of those 10 that those are getting compared to. But yeah, it does mean that that video is probably on track to do around somewhere between about 150 and 200,000 views in the first month is what my guess of where that will land. But I mean, it could pick up further. Like my best ever performing video only had about a few thousand views or so after the first maybe 3 weeks. And then an additional 3 or 4 weeks later, it had 100,000, 200,000 views. So it really exploded right in the back half of that first month. But it looks like, this video is going to be pretty well. All right, let's talk about America banning TikTok. This is crazy. And if you're not up to date on this, I'll fill you in. So the American government has been flirting with banning TikTok for a number of years. They first sort of announced interest in it 2 or 3 years ago, mostly over data concerns or national security concerns. Are we letting essentially their main political rival or main rival economy have a really tight hold on the data of a large number of their populace, is what they claim is the main reason for starting to become concerned with this. And I am going to give you a couple of, I think, unique and well-rounded perspectives on this because I'm someone who did most of a master's in cybersecurity, someone who worked in tech for ages and who now is a full-time content creator. So I think I've run the full gamut to have a pretty good perspective on what this looks like. And it is true that data sovereignty, which is the idea that any data that an app or company collects on its users should remain in the country that place is from. Like in Australia, it's a big talking point with, say, things like government agencies who collect whatever it is, your tax data or whatever. Because the way that a lot of tech companies scale, they'll often use cloud services to store part of that information. And you need to ensure that wherever those actual cloud servers live are still within Australia, or else, in theory, depending on the legislation of whatever country that data is actually getting stored in, that government could just completely legally take access over, just see all of the data that is in that like data center or service or something. However, with TikTok, well, I'll just say that Meta, the company that owns Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp, has broken every single US lobbying record with how much they have lobbied both political parties in the lead up to last year's election to try and essentially get TikTok banned, because it is by far, I think, the biggest competitor to and the biggest threat and risk to those companies in terms of taking over market share. And you've seen the same thing with YouTube from the creator's perspective, that there was this really interesting article that I was reading last week that someone did a study on the impact of how much long form content is being watched after the launch of TikTok. And essentially, long form content on YouTube has been, like, relative to populations or whatever, the amount of time that someone's willing to watch those videos has been steadily declining since the rise of TikTok, that you just essentially have more of the population who, because YouTube was kind of their only choice for slightly more, authentic, engaging, personal content, because that was the only choice, now they have this alternate choice that is usually a bit more stimulating for your like the dopamine centers in your brain. That a lot of the general populace is choosing TikTok, which is a lot more lightweight and kind of easy to watch than YouTube, whereas previously YouTube would have been the only choice, which as someone who's even though I have more TikTok followers than YouTube followers, the other way around. I have more TikTok followers than YouTube followers. I hope I said that right the first time, actually. But I think identify as a YouTuber more so than TikTok. And I am not particularly worried about that impact. But back to America banning TikTok, the response has been crazy across social media. Obviously, there is now this whole movement of users of TikTok downloading this other Chinese-made app, which is actually made by the Chinese government, called Red Note, or I'm not going to try and pronounce it, but it's called Red Note. And it has some really interesting, in the terms and conditions, you essentially need to agree to uphold a reverence for the Chinese Communist Party. And you need to do a good job of promoting China and that sort of thing, which I think is really interesting. That obviously no one signing up to has kind of realized that. But essentially, they're doing it out of this big middle finger that if Meta is the company that's bankrolled the taking away of a large part of the population's favorite app, that these users don't want to then just go to that party that's responsible for getting their favorite app banned. They don't want to go to the enemy and use Instagram Reels. And personally, one thing I've talked about with other creators, I haven't said it publicly, but I really, really bemoan having to grow my Instagram audience. But it's something that's still pretty important to the creator economy from the perspective of brand partnerships and stuff, or even just the ability to, say, reach out to someone that you want to collaborate with. You need to do that through Instagram. And if I am putting no effort into growing that and I'm reaching out with an account with a couple hundred followers and asking to collaborate or ask for advice or something like that to an account with possibly hundreds of thousands or millions. So that's why it's kind of important for creators to still try and grow an Instagram, even though, oh God, I just don't think right now Instagram has that much of a future in providing a lot of value to content creators, especially when you're much more focused on creating video content and building communities and that sort of thing. And it's also Instagram's really hard to grow for next to no reward, even though a lot of creator advice says that YouTube is the hardest to grow. Obviously, Instagram is the account that I have the least amount of followers on. Last time I checked, I've got 21,000, which is, nothing to sneeze at by any chance. But the majority of that's come from one reel that did pretty well. And in a couple YouTube videos, I do ask my audience, please go and follow me on Instagram because I need these followers, even though I don't really care for Instagram that much. Although I am doing more sort of almost bloggy sort of post to Instagram, which I'm enjoying. Just anytime I have an idea that I don't want, it's an interesting piece of information, but I don't want to film a video about it. I've just got other video ideas that are much more important to shoot. I can actually just kind of put that stuff on Instagram. So that's kind of nice. And then where we are at with the story on America banning TikTok at the moment is the ban officially, as of recording, comes into place in 3 days' time. It's actually the 17th now. The ban comes into effect on the 19th, but because I'm in Australia, we're a day ahead. So in roughly 72 hours' time is when the ban would come into effect. And what that would mean is that the app doesn't just get deleted off everyone's phones. They don't shut down the TikTok servers. The app essentially just gets removed from app stores. And then over time, the app will become less and less functional and will also start to become a fair bit of a security risk to anyone who has it on their phone, because once someone finds some sort of hacky exploit to use with an app, if the developer is not able to roll out updates to it, which because it's off the Play Store, which is in charge of updates, Play and Apple App Store, which is in charge of updates, you then don't have the ability to update it with security updates, and it starts to become a pretty big risk to have on your phone, which is something that I guarantee some nefarious parties will eventually take advantage of. The next question that I then have, which I don't actually know the answer to, but at least definitely not with Apple, but at least with Android users, because there are alternate app stores and alternate ways to download apps, even though it's banned, those users probably can keep using TikTok. You might have to go through a VPN or something, but then you can download it. And how will this impact me as a creator? Fortunately, I have checked my numbers on the Culinary Garden TikTok account. Over the last 60 days, only about 0.8% of my audience has come from America. So I will notice essentially no impact to my audience, which I'm thankful of, which is like compared to YouTube, where 28% of my audience is American. Yeah, if the same thing happened to YouTube, I would be a lot more devastated. And then where we're at is some senators have tried to introduce additional legislation to extend the TikTok ban, essentially to allow the incoming administration to then actually make a ruling on it themselves if they want to not ban TikTok or do something different, some sort of alternate strategy. However, it's looking more like that's probably not going to pass. If I was a betting man, I would definitely bet on that not passing and the ban still remaining upheld. Of course, the incoming administration does have the opportunity to then reverse the ban through actual legislation, but from what I understand, that's a significant uphill battle compared to delaying it and then getting to rule on it, because you then require like 2/3 of Congress to pass something as opposed to like 50% or whatever it is. And then we'll actually just have to wait and see. The other outcome that could happen, although I don't believe it will, is TikTok or ByteDance, the company that owns TikTok, could sell TikTok or the American portion of TikTok to a US-based business, which was a big part of essentially what the American government was banking on ByteDance to do. But ByteDance are pretty much doubling down and saying they're not going to sell. You do have like Mr. Beast is allegedly putting in an offer to try and buy TikTok, which in my opinion would be an exceptional outcome for the creator community. But I don't think it'll happen with no reason, like nothing against Mr. Beast. I think it's just ByteDance aren't going to sell in general. Allegedly, well, what I saw on the internet, but I mean, there's misinformation everywhere, so I don't know if this is true, but allegedly the Chinese government is in talk with the US government to essentially force the sale of the American TikTok so that they can keep it. Allegedly, Elon Musk is attached to that deal, which is also crazy if that happens as well. Just goes to show the power of having a net worth of about $400 billion that it starts to get pretty easy to get what you want. Yes, and we'll have to wait and see. We'll probably talk about it next week because then we'll have the definitive answer as to if it's banned or not. I think it will be, but I think it won't be that dramatic to start with, especially I'm pretty sure Android users will be able to keep using TikTok. Actually, it would be interesting to see if Android users could keep using TikTok in the US and how that would actually impact Android and iPhone sales. Next up, I'm talking about how to deal with hate comments, which after launching this podcast, I have a pretty unique perspective of, in my opinion. And before we get to that, if you're watching this on YouTube, please leave me a comment and feel free to ask me any questions. Same with if you're listening via an audio format. If you want, you can now email me at clickworthypod@gmail.com. And if you start emailing in some questions about being a creator, same as leaving it as a comment on the YouTube video about being a creator, or maybe a myth that you've heard that you want to know if it's true or not. And I'll start being able to cover that in some of these episodes. And also, please make sure to leave a review, especially if you're listening to this as an audio-only podcast on whatever platform you are. Please leave a 5-star review. Obviously, on YouTube, just give it a thumbs up and you will help this podcast grow and keep going. And also, my God, I didn't realize when I've recorded the last one, but podcast hosting is more expensive than I thought it would be. For someone like me who actually wants to kind of keep pumping these out, so I don't want to limit myself to, say, only uploading 2 hours of audio a month, I'm having to pay nearly like $25 Australian a month just to keep this going, which is, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, is pretty cheap. But boy, it's annoying compared to, YouTube, which is completely free and then eventually makes you money. So, how do you deal with hate comments? One theory that I have had for a while on hate comments is that you actually get more of them as a small and brand new creator, or at least you get a lot higher ratio of hate comments as a brand new creator than you do when you're more established. Because I kind of noticed that a little bit over the journey. But what I have basically confirmed, because I have launched this podcast and I've also now created a TikTok for this podcast, but I haven't told anyone about it yet. But I've started publishing a few clips from the podcast on there. If you want to follow me, just search Clickworthy Podcast and you will find it. I totally forget what the actual handle that I used is, but the logo is the same as the podcast on audio platforms. It's the red laptop screen with the mouse as a play button. And I posting some clips because, again, once I do the hard launch of this podcast, I actually want to have a little bit of a backlog of content that people can go and check out. Just getting hate comments about like, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. This guy has no idea how to grow. Like, why would I ever take advice from someone who clearly doesn't know like how to make videos or whatever? And it's just so funny, and it really helps put into perspective. And I really hope this helps put into perspective for you that when you try and do something, when you try and put yourself out there, try and chase your dreams, what you're doing more often than not is to everyone else in the world, you're holding up a mirror to them and making them see themselves that they're not able to, that they aren't willing to take that step to try and achieve something themselves. And so they really project that like hatred onto you. And you really, really need to not take it personally. As I've been growing my YouTube channel, one thing that I always, one theory that I've always held myself to is that I'm not going to take advice from comments that tell me how I should do something, like how I should do something different, like don't do this, don't do that. I'm not going to take advice from someone with less subscribers than me. There is this fantastic analogy that I heard once that is, if you are on a commercial airplane and it's about to fly through a storm, would you go and like knock on the cabin door and ask the pilot, oh, hey, do you want any tips on how to fly through this storm? And then the pilot goes like, why? Have you flown a Boeing 747 through storms before? And he goes, no, but I've got a couple good ideas. And that's just exactly what it's like when, as soon as you're a YouTuber, everyone thinks, because they've watched a lot of content, that they know how to do it better than you. And then you click onto their profile and they've posted no videos, or they posted 2 9 years ago that have like 100 views each. And well, in my case, I'm getting at that stage thousands or tens of thousands of views per video and kind of starting to work out how to actually make a watchable piece of content. And then people trying to tell me that like, I need to not do this in my intros, I need to not do that in my intros. Especially it's really funny that I always get, less so anymore, but I used to get a lot more comments of people telling me that like they would click into the video, I assume probably watch the ad in front of the video, just to comment, hey, I might have watched this video if it wasn't for the clickbaity thumbnail, without realizing, I do acknowledge that my thumbnails and titles are a bit clickbaity, but they're definitely not clickbait. I just try to find the exact framing of whatever idea I'm trying to show in a given video that is just the most clickworthy. Haha, it's the name of the podcast. So that I then have the most amount of people clicking onto the video to then learn like what the video is generally about. I'm never misdirecting my audience. I mean, there are some videos where I purposely try to misdirect my audience, but it's purely there are a couple concepts that I really want to tell people in gardening about that beginners don't know how to search for. Say just things like soil temperatures. Super important to understand and can like transform your ability to understand like when you need to plant things like to actually have a successful garden. But beginners are not searching what do I need to know about soil temperatures. They don't even know enough to search for that. So then I need to package that in some sort of a title and thumbnail that's like the big mistake you're making in your garden that is intriguing enough to actually click on. And back to the comments of the people that would comment and say, I would watch this if it wasn't for your titles and thumbnails, but they don't realize that without that being clickable enough and the video itself being good enough, that YouTube would have never even given them the impression, which is showing my video on their screen at some point. They would have never seen it if it wasn't for that title and thumbnail being clickable enough for enough people to click into it, watch it, for YouTube to then want to recommend it to an even wider audience. And it's the thing that is one of the big reality versus expectation parts of YouTube from someone who watched YouTube videos for so long and thought I would know what it was like, to someone who's then become a full-time YouTuber in such a short time frame. I think I have a pretty good perspective on the expectation versus reality of being a YouTube, because the expectation part is still so recent, and how much making videos is not about trying to make the best video of a given topic, not trying to go into the like 100th percent trying to explain a concept at like a university in-depth level. It is trying to create a version that covers information about that topic. And of course, I make like educational content. So this is a little bit different, but you'll still see what I mean, where you're trying to create a version of that video idea that then appeals to a really not super wide audience, but that is really appealing for people to want to click on. But for new YouTubers, that should also be quite liberating, because the worst way to try and grow on YouTube is to try and make the best product. Instead, you've just got to work out a version that is like really clickable, really interesting, has a reason for the audience to keep watching. And in that, you can actually have really like bad camera quality. You need like decent audio quality because you need to be understood. And you can have like pretty rudimentary editing and all of that stuff that you probably think is hard. But as long as like the video itself is a good idea that's like clickable and is more often than not, I have learned to really err on the side of providing less information, providing not enough about a topic than providing too much. I have found works really, really well in terms of having your audience actually watch the full way through the video, which will then get YouTube to recommend it to more people, as opposed to you can go just too deep into it to where it starts to get a bit fuzzy in the minds of the audience, and then they kind of just drift off and like click away halfway through the video. And so with hate comments, when you're new, you have to accept that they're going to come, but then you need to be so resolute in you are doing this for like an end goal. Like this is a long-term play. You need to understand that what you are doing when you're making your first 30 videos or so, that the goal is not really to make great videos. It is to undertake that learning process of how to make videos. And I really distinctly remember about my 4th YouTube video, just getting comments about people telling me that I explained some things like really poorly, which like I would have, but it was at that time that I kind of shifted pretty well into this mindset of like the goal is to get something done, get as much like learning out of each given video that I could, out of like learning how to make a good video, publish it, get it onto the next. And then when I explained some things poorly in some early videos, like getting comments of people being like, you need to stop making videos because you're not good at this. And just going like, does this person for some reason, I thought that every person who watched my videos would then like click on my channel and go, oh, this is only like their 3rd or 4th video. This is that's pretty good for being so early on. But of course, they don't do that. They just think that everyone who makes a video is an established YouTuber and will probably treat them as such. And then when it's like, the video quality that someone could make when they're brand new and like isn't that good, then they're like going to tell them. But yeah, you just need to let them comment, thank them for the engagement, because each comment will help whatever platform you're publishing to post it, like show that video to more people, and then just kind of move on. And you also, I love the George Carlin quote that's, think about how dumb the average person is. And then you need to remember that half of all humans are dumber than that again. And commenters will especially since I'm in like the education niche, and especially in gardening, where there is so much misinformation that kind of comes from like old wives' tales that's then been disproven. The amount of times that I do a really well researched video, like pretty well fact checked, or at least to the best of my ability, where I spend more time fact checking than actually writing the video. I make it, like I do 12 hours of editing, I put it up, and then you just get comments from when I'm like, say, disproving old gardening wives' tales. And then you just get like comments of people being like, that's not how it works. This is actually how it works. And they just reaffirm the wives' tale that's like not supported. And you've just got to go like, oh yeah, that's right. People who comment are just dumb sometimes. Before I started any of the garden stuff, I started a TikTok account just where I talked about cars a bunch, because that's one of my other big like passions and love is just, I've always loved cars, like working on my cars, modifying my cars. And then I was just like, made this really short TikTok series on a channel that is still around, but I won't tell you what it is. But you can definitely go and try and find it on TikTok, where I was just talking about like underrated cars essentially. And one of the cars I was talking about was this Japanese like performance sedan. I forget exactly what model of car it was, but like I show images of it on screen. It's a 4-door car with a boot, sedan silhouette. Like it's a sedan by Toyota's like own description. It's a sedan. And then the day that I realized like, oh, you just need to ignore the comments because they don't know what they're talking about. Like they're just so, like not all commenters obviously, but like when someone's leaving you a hate comment, you need to assume that they are very dumb. And this comment sure was, because it said, paraphrased, it was like, a sedan, ? You don't know what the hell you're talking about. You need to do your research, little boy. And it's just like, I showed you photos of it on the screen. Like it's literally a sedan. I don't know what you're possibly arguing about. It's like that old internet post. It's like people on the internet will argue about anything, and to prove that point, here's a stick. And then people in the comments always argue about like whether it's a stick or not. And some people just want to like, they just want to comment. They just want to be part of the thing. And yeah, we'll move on in this. This is the one last thing before we move on. I distinctly remember I think it might have been my 5th YouTube video, I got 2 comments back to back. One was, I can tell that you're good at gardening, but you need to give up making the videos. They're no good. And the very next comment was, it's a shame the video production is so professional and high quality that people might actually think you know how to garden. And it's just like different. You just need to accept, once you put it out into the world, different people will interpret in different ways. It does suck that sometimes audience members will just choose to take something, interpret it the absolute possibly worst way that they can. And that's on them, though. You can't let it affect you. And you just need to get on to making your next video. Speaking of which, I mentioned at the start, I would reveal this single tip that finally got me over the line to actually starting to post some content. And then once I did start posting content, I absolutely believe understanding this is the superpower of how I grew so quickly. I referenced it in one of my second channel's videos, but it's called The Cult of Done, which the Cult of Done manifesto was written in 20 minutes because the 2 writers of it gave themselves 20 minutes to do it, and that's all they had. And it is these 13 dot points, these 13 like rules to just try and help you realize when you're trying to do something, be a creator, be a maker, what is actually important to focus on. And when this first came out, it went pretty viral within like the maker community. People who build stuff kind of finally having something to put their finger on and go, yeah, this is like these. Someone has finally started to articulate kind of what it's about that actually makes you good at what you do. So we'll go through the 13 points and I'll expand on most of them as we go. The first one is there are 3 states of being: not knowing, action, and completion. Essentially, you need to accept that anytime you want to achieve something like making a video, you need to understand that you are going to start nearly every single project, every single video until you've made probably thousands, that you are not going to know how to do part of that process. And the only way that you can overcome that not knowing is by actually doing it and then learning along the way, which is where you move into the second step, action. Actually taking action and doing the thing. You are not going to become a content creator just by sitting around binging content about how to actually be a creator. You at some stage need to pull that trigger and actually just start. And then you move on to completion, where in every single project, you need to just always be getting to this goal of being just done with it. Not being done as in having a perfect product, just being able to close off that project and have it be good enough that you can then move on to the next thing, which brings us to point 2. Accept that everything is a draft. It helps to get it done. If you can shift your mindset that every single piece of content or artwork or whatever pursuit you're pursuing is only ever a draft, it's a approximation of what you envisioned in the end, what you are hoping to achieve. Yeah, accepting that everything is a draft, because if you hold yourself to some sort of a really high standard, you are never actually going to be able to get any project to a completion to the point that you're ready to share it with the world. Something I try to articulate a fair bit is that the key to success is just getting something to 80% good enough or 85% good enough and then shipping it, and really starting to build that reflex that being good enough, close enough is really valuable. Being pretty good and actually posted will get you way more. In fact, having a bad video and posting it will get you more views than having a exceptional work in progress video that you never actually post. 3, there is no editing stage, which when talking about video can be really confusing. So let's break this one down. The emphasis on this is that the importance is on the skills that you learn along the way of doing a project rather than trying to create the perfect product in the end. And say in video production, the idea for this is once a video is published, once you have done the video, you upload it to YouTube, it is done. You don't then go back and keep trying to finesse it and editing it to try and get that individual product better. Instead, you need to just move on to the next thing. You don't tweak done projects. You value your own ability to, instead of trying to have one incredibly created video and valuing that, you value your own skill set to be able to produce as many videos that are that quality as you will ever need to. Point 4. Pretending to know what you're doing is almost the same as knowing what you're doing. So just accept that you know what you're doing, even if you don't, and do it. There is a fantastic quote that I think gets to the same crux as this, but I personally prefer, and it's do stuff before you know how. The only way that you are going to actually be able to do something valuable, do something good and incredible that actually advances whatever cause or passion that you're trying to do, is you need to actually just start and work it out. Let me ask you, because I've noticed this happen over the years and sort of slowly realizing this is one of the things that finally led me to actually starting the channel and being willing to just kind of grind away at this improvement. Even though I think obviously that improvement occurred a little bit quicker than I was expecting it to. But do you have someone in your life, maybe a friend from school, where on their social medias they just start posting them doing some sort of new hobby or skill, and they just kind of keep posting about it over the next 12 months or a year or whatever, and all of a sudden they are just, what they're producing is actually really incredible. Like, I've witnessed this with people with photography or say with drawing, where they start posting a couple images and you go, well, that's not very good, but good on them for posting it. And then they keep posting things and you go, yeah, it's cool that like you're in it, but it's a bit cringe or whatever. And then all of a sudden it's 12 months later and you see what they're posting and it's genuinely incredible, like mind-blowing how good the product that they are producing is. And you start by just going like in your own mind, like putting those people down because you go like, that's so cringe actually trying to do something. And then all of a sudden, just because they actually have done something and stuck at it for a while, the level of improvement that they get to starts to produce incredible results. And that's kind of what this is about, is that you need to be willing to start by producing bad stuff, completely understanding that what you are undertaking is saying, I am now a content creator. And as part of that journey, I'm just going to make a bunch of bad stuff. And every time I do, I'm going to do something better. And what I am really saying is that I can see myself that in 2 years, I'm going to be actually pretty good at this and be able to do it to a high standard. And just part of that process is me just getting through these reps now. Point 5, banish procrastination. If you wait more than a week to get an idea done, abandon it. This is one of the biggest reflexes you need to be able to build, is just there is no perfect time to start. There is not going to be a better time in the future to start doing something than there is today or right now. There is always a perfect excuse, a perfectly valid reason that you should not make a video now. And instead you go, well, then I'll do it next weekend, or I'll do it next Monday. I'll do it this afternoon. And it doesn't happen. You just do it now. If you have an idea for an incredible YouTube series or whatever, and you go, I think that's going to be incredible. And then you just go like, yeah, but I'll do it in a couple months. Just abandon it. It doesn't matter. Ideas are so cheap. What's important is actually doing something. Yeah, banish procrastination. There is doing and there is not doing. There's no planning anymore. 6, the point of being done is not to finish, but to get other things done. Being done with something is just a way to get on to the next thing that is more exciting. I cannot tell you the amount of times that I get even maybe 30% of the way through a video and I'm already excited about I have such a good idea for the next video and I'm so excited about doing that. So then all I need to do is try and finish this current project and then get onto that. Getting done really helps you move on to more exciting things in more ways than one. Once you're done, you can throw it away. You start to really de-emphasize the importance of having good individual products and just go, once a video is done, just post it. There's a brilliant Alfonso Cuarón, who's a movie director who directed like Gravity and like the third Harry Potter movie, Children of Men. When asked about like, what do you think about your, previous films sort of thing? And he just says, I think of them like an ex-wife where I wish them well, but I don't really want anything to do with them. And that's exactly this, that like once you're done with it, you can just kind of ignore it. Like it doesn't matter anymore. Just get on to the next thing. 8, laugh at perfection. It's boring and keeps you from being done. This is one of the biggest things you need to accept, that when you're in any creative pursuit, but I think being a content creator, this is really cranked up a fair bit, because any time that you spend working on a project, trying to get it to perfection, is time that it's not actually uploaded and it's not actually getting seen by people. If the time that it takes to get a video from 80% good to 100% perfect is probably 2 to 4 to 10 times as much effort as it takes to get it from 0 to 80%. So what will probably benefit you over the long term more is actually getting something to that 80%, 85% good enough, and posted that, and then moving on to your next project. That will get you more views than trying to just hyper focus on getting this one thing perfect. The worst thing you can do is actually trying to hold yourself to a high standard and being perfect. You can hold yourself to a high standard, but that high standard has to include your ability to actually ship things. And plus, this isn't part of the cult of done, but every time you're actually posting something is another opportunity to learn what the audience actually responds to. Imagine you spend that extra 4 times of the effort on a video to try and get it to that 100%, to then post it, only to find out that then the actual video idea itself just doesn't resonate with an audience. And no matter how good you make that video, it's just never going to perform well because the idea itself just isn't interesting for people to click on. And it's one of the reasons that it's a good idea to try and to just work out how to ignore hate comments, because people on the internet are always going to, expect perfection. It's that old story about the teacher writes 100 equations on the board and they're all correct, but then at the end he writes 3 + 4 = 6. And students raise their hand and go like, "But sir, 3 + 4 doesn't equal 6." And he says, "You see, there are 100 correct equations on this board, yet the only thing people commented on was the single one that wasn't correct. The people are so much more quickly criticize anything that could be improved over complimenting you on something that is actually good and valuable." Like, I'm always pretty proud of some of my individual scene transitions and edits and stuff that are really subtle. And you never get any compliment on those because the idea is to make it invisible. But those take hours to do. But I mispronounce a word and oh boy, will the comments let me know when I mispronounce a word. 9, people without dirty hands are wrong. Doing something makes you right. This is kind of what I was getting to with hate comments. Don't take advice from people who haven't done the thing. People who haven't actually been there and tried to do something and have actually been somewhat successful at it. People with dirty hands, don't accept criticism from them because they just don't know what it's actually like. I saw this really interesting TikTok once about one of the worst things in Australian culture is we have this huge adversity to tall poppies or someone to actually wants to give something a go. We are so quick to criticize those people that anytime someone starts to actually post TikToks, they will say behind that person's back "Oh, that's so cringe. They're so cringe. What's he think? He's a big shot trying to actually make content. What does she think? She's actually someone that someone cares about. No one's actually going to care what she says," sort of thing. And then there is just this special bond that starts to get built between Australian creators because we all kind of have to go through that, and that kind of taking that feeling that people are talking about you in that way and just pushing it down and then overcoming that. And what I really, really want you to take away from this part is but those people are worthless. And also, you are always going to be more critical of your own work, more critical of the parts of the work that actually matter, and you do need to make meaningful improvement to than any sort of hate comment ever will. Part 11. Destruction is a variant of done. A version of done is destroying the thing, or what I have also done before is maybe 70, 80% of a way through a video is I've just abandoned it and I've gone, this just isn't worth the time that it's going to take to get this to the point that I can actually post it. And I do think are really, really valuable. It is more often than not going to be more valuable for you to try and get that to the point that it is actually just good enough to be published and then publishing it. That will be more valuable for you and your learning curve and your career, because ultimately we don't really know how the audience is going to respond to a given piece of content. Some of my best performing videos are things that I have put the least amount of effort into, but it just happens to resonate with the audience in a particular way. So you're always better off erring on the side of actually posting it. But in the rare circumstances where you just go, this actually isn't going to work, I'm just going to abandon it. That abandonment is a version of getting that thing done. And you still get to take a whole bunch of learnings away from that. And you get to, again, improve your own skill set of creating content as opposed to just ending up with more finished pieces of content. The skill is valuable. 12. If you have an idea and publish it on the internet, that counts as the ghost of done. This is one of the biggest things that if you can accept, you will just skyrocket in terms of your maturity of how you look at ideas that you should try or businesses or other creators, is that ideas are so worthless. Obviously, coming from a tech background, and also I used to work a fair bit with like tech startups, and there is just this great line in there that startups are always so worried that they have an idea so good that if they say it out loud to anyone, that it might get stolen, and then their business idea just goes up in smoke. But you can kind of disprove this by, if you have some idea, say you have a new social media competitor that you think is just going to be mind-blowing, you can find the Facebook product manager who's in charge of that sort of functionality at Facebook. You can email them and you can say, here is my idea for a game-changing alternative feature that you could put on the platform, and beg them to implement it. And they just won't. They just ignore it. Like, ideas are so fickle. They just are so worthless, or at least they are on the scale of worthlessness to something that will actually make a difference. A bad idea executed and done will get you more views than a fantastic idea that you never actually do. So what is so much more valuable than ideas is actually doing stuff and getting it done and publishing it. And so what you should do is, anytime you have any great ideas and you go, this is just something that I'm never personally going to do, you should put them on the internet for other people to steal. And especially if it's like, say, a business idea and you go, this is something that I think would work, it could improve the world, but I'm just never going to do it. If you post that online, someone else might do it and might actually improve the world. And that also counts as kind of being done with something, and it clears it almost out of your idea backlog. And then you get to focus on more ideas that are more important for you in advancing your own career. 13, the last point. Done is the engine of more. Being done is the only way of finding out what's next. Getting things finished. The goal isn't to have one piece of incredible content. The goal of getting things done is it enables you to make more content that's better every time. There is nothing so valuable as to actually doing something, getting it done, publishing it. And that is the cult of done. And the one thing that I want to add on to this, that I have stolen from this tech project management framework called ShapeUp. ShapeUp is a book that you can read for content creators. I think there are some tech books that, like tech business books, that could be really valuable, like the Lean Startup is one. But the book ShapeUp has some incredible ideas. I don't think it's going to be anywhere near as valuable for content creators to read as something like the Lean Startup or maybe the Diary of the CEO. But the whole concept of ShapeUp is that you need to build features of software in blocks of 6 weeks worth of effort. And when you do that, you say the time that it takes us to do something is fixed. the scope of what we want to build is completely malleable, completely variable. And the line that I always think of when making videos is there's a version of this that ships, or there's a version of this that we can build in 6 weeks. And as a new content creator, what I want you to sort of translate that into is you might have cool ideas about the types of content that you eventually want to do. I eventually want to do complete like garden transformations. I want to do huge giveaways to my audience. I can't do that right now with being a crew of one person and with a very limited budget. And also when I started making videos, it was the winter, so not much was growing in the garden. I couldn't really make tutorials for how to grow certain plants. So I had to ask myself, what is a version of the kind of inspirational, informational content about gardening that I could make right then, like that day? What's something that I can make? And then that's when I started to make these more interesting, twisted, sciencey videos that focus on gardening. I take a lot of inspiration in my videos from, say, like Vsauce, my very first video, which is why you can't plant supermarket potatoes. If you watch that and have the YouTuber Tom Scott in your mind, I think you will realize that I'm essentially trying to rip off Tom Scott's video format, where it's just like, here's a really interesting thing, I'm going to talk about it. And I actually went to like some different locations and stuff, kind of like he does. But that kind of enabled me to help start building that audience and more so building that experience of trying to make good videos. Because what I've worked out is that video making is such a skill, and having that ability to tell a good story with something that really grabs your attention straight away and then kind of almost delays that gratification of having that curiosity that you open up closed, so that you can then spend the rest of the time through the video kind of telling the story of how you get to that point or what you need to know before you get the final reveal. That is so translatable between all genres of YouTube, between all niches. Even if, say, when I originally started making videos on TikTok, or like when I started making videos, I really wanted to do car content. Like I wanted to do modifying cars and that sort of thing. But then I had a daughter and I couldn't get 5 or 6 hours of unbroken time to film a car video. So halfway through trying to film the first video for that channel, I just sort of gave up and I'm like, I don't know what to do. And then when I was just cleaning up the garden, I kind of went, the other type of channel that I thought about making a whole bunch was like gardening and like urban homesteading type stuff, like making things from scratch. And then I was like, that sort of video is a version of videos that I can make that fits all of my current restrictions. And you are always going to have restrictions of things that you wish you could do. You might have some dream format or video ideas and you just don't have the resources to do them, or you have school that you need to work around, or your job, so you can't film during the times that is relevant to when your niche requires stuff to be filmed. And then you just need to think of, but what is a format that actually works, especially with something like what's a version of your videos that's actually low budget, even if it's something like maybe you want to do tech reviews, but you can't afford to buy a new phone every 2 weeks when a new phone comes out to actually review it. And so instead you go, well, then I'm going to do software reviews because those are like apps and stuff are free or much cheaper than a new handset. Like there is a version of the channel that you want to make that you can get started on right now. And so today I'm going to leave you with this poem that is just for anyone who is thinking about actually trying to build something, do something for themselves, start to be a creator. I think this is so inspirational to actually getting you to take that step. It's a poem, but I mean, it's not a wanky poem, from The Strangest Loop called Things That Are Not Doing the Thing. And it's 12 lines. Preparing to do the thing isn't doing the thing. Scheduling time to do the thing isn't doing the thing. Making a to-do list for the thing isn't doing the thing. Telling people you're going to do the thing isn't doing the thing. Messaging friends who may or may not be doing the thing isn't doing the thing. Writing a banger tweet about how you're going to do the thing isn't doing the thing. Hating on yourself for not doing the thing isn't doing the thing. Hating on other people who have done the thing isn't doing the thing. Hating on the obstacles in the way of doing the thing isn't doing the thing. Fantasizing about all the adoration you'll receive once you've done the thing isn't doing the thing. Reading about how to do the thing isn't doing the thing. Reading about how other people did the thing isn't doing the thing. Reading this essay isn't doing the thing. The only thing that's doing the thing is doing the thing. I'm Ryan Bolt. This has been Clickworthy. Thank you for listening. Make sure to rate the podcast.